To say this is the first annual. Let's see how it goes today. I'm confident of the great momentum, action, and commitment that will emerge out of this room. We will bring sunshine to our county, I'm sure. What dawned on me this morning was neither rain, nor sleet, nor snow. You know the phrase. You may remember that we had originally scheduled this great event back in the spring on a teacher workday to be certain to engage our kindergarten educators and school administration and faculty. And thanks to the snow, that day got redirected to student instruction. Here we are today. I was a little nervous about July, but we welcome those of you who are here on your first day of the Summer Institute and participating in your preparation for the new school year. So we're especially grateful to Durham Public School educators who are here with us today. And for those of you who pulled out the umbrellas and wrapped your heads in hoods or just made the mad dash and came in a little wet around the edges, we're glad you're here. This is the most important effort in our community today. We have an obligation and a responsibility to ensure, in fact, to guarantee that every child in Durham County is ready to enter school successful, not only in school, but in life. Our broad audience today reflects that strong commitment. And as you look around, read people's name tags, and as you meet and greet each other, longtime colleagues, and hopefully some new friends as well, and as you engage in focused conversation at your tables a little later this morning, we hope you come away with the sense of how broad-based we are together in this room, the many roles and responsibilities that we each have, and how we each can play a significant part in the life of a child and in the health and well-being of our community. I am most appreciative of my colleague Sue Cotterman, the Director of Early Education at Durham Public Schools. Sue, will you stand, please, and be recognized? I'm also most appreciative of the whole Durham's Partnership for Children staff, but especially Ren Davison, who is our program coordinator who has championed this effort from grand concept to specific detail. Ren, will you be recognized? Members of the planning committee are walking around in Ready Eddie shirts because we are excited about getting to kindergarten. So please note all the people in Ready Eddie shirts and thank them for their role in the planning committee and in the Transition to Kindergarten Advisory Group that is guiding this initiative onward. We have many board members present here, and I would like for Durham's Partnership for Children board members to raise your hand and be recognized. Some of you are also Durham Public School board members. Would you raise your hand as those elected officials? We are grateful for other elected officials in the room, and we know that both our local, our statewide, and even our congressional delegations are represented with staff here today. And again, we're very appreciative of that. In this audience, we have professional educators, university researchers, national education consultants, state, Department of Public Instruction, and Department of Health and Human Services representatives, private industry, local business, nonprofits, our own funded partners, the list goes on and on. In that breadth, we want to make a certain recognition of those who've made today possible, and that is our generous funder in PNC Bank. Represented by Jenny Grant and Savannah Hagan, we really appreciate PNC's support locally in this community to ensure that every child grows up great. Thank you for making this statement. This Transition to Kindergarten initiative also began quite a few years ago, and we have had generous support also from Wells Fargo and from the Morgan Creek Foundation, and we appreciate their support of the ongoing initiative. A few housekeeping notes. Please make sure that you stop by at Lakeshore and Kaplan Displays. We're appreciative of their sponsorship and their willingness to showcase their curriculum and supplies for you. I know that they have special incentives for those of you who stop by their tables, so be sure to spend some time there. We will be reorganizing ourselves partway through the day. So enjoy the people you're sitting with, get acquainted with them, but also be prepared to move. So after our break, when you come back, we'll reassign you according to the number that's on your name tag. We will add numbers to the table, so you might want to bring your things with you if you leave the room at break, so when you come back, you can be nimble to go to an assigned table. And we'll tell you more about that a little bit later. We also have wonderful raffle opportunities, and the raffle prizes will be drawn right before the break. So during the break, if you enter the raffle, and if you just can't wait to see if you're a winner, you'll need to go out into the hallway and look at the flip chart and see if your name is there so that you can claim your prizes. We're grateful to those who made those prizes available for us. We also, at the end of the day, will ask for your evaluation and feedback. So be prepared for that. And you may even want to jot notes on that form as the morning proceeds. We'll also want you to know that there is a parking ticket on the left side of your packet. I can't say this will pay for your parking, but I can say that it will keep the cost to a $3 maximum. So it's in your best interest to find that parking ticket and use it as you exit the lot across the street. And now, what we really came here for. You know, a summit is an interesting word. It's the peak, it's a high moment. It's something out of the ordinary. And we're gathered here today in a way that we don't usually do on a Monday morning in the middle of the summer. And yet this summit may be a bit different. This summit is really working in the valley already. We're not going to stay too high on the mountaintop in the clouds, kind of on an intellectual, theoretical basis. We're going to put you to work. We're going to come down off the mountain and get to where the real people live, to where our students are most needing our guidance, where we as concerned residents of this community, educators, professionals alike, join together where the rubber meets the road. So this is a summit, one part of the dialogue that will continue, and then the real work will also begin. And our guide today is a true, energizing expert, a visionary who's been noted not only for his research, but his leadership. And we're so pleased to welcome Ken Smythe-Leistikow to our community today. What gives Ken the most credibility at this moment is he and his wife are the parents of a rising kindergartner. Talk about pressure in their household. They've got to get it right. Ken has a brilliant resume. He comes to us as the Assistant Director of the University of Pittsburgh Office of Child Development. Prior to that role, he served as the Pathways to School Success Director for that office, where he has researched, developed, and implemented programs that target children and families as they transition into kindergarten. Harvard has noted Ken as an emerging leader in their family involvement network of educators. He's been recognized in his own community as a 40 under 40 emerging leader in his own right. His prior work has included adolescent group home management, after-school programming, family support, Head Start, and volunteer mentoring programming. Many of us have a lot of those same connections, so we can see a colleague and peer in Ken. Ken teaches as an adjunct instructor at the University of Pittsburgh, as well as the Community College of Allegheny County, and he has also taught at the University of Alabama. You can imagine he is funded by grantors of large renown. You can imagine that he's also been very educated, not only receiving a bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, but also a Master of Social Work from the University of Alabama. That's just resume stuff. That's what Ken told me. What he really wants you to know is that everyone has a role. Each of us have an important part to play in making a meaningful difference in the life of a child, in the network of families, and in the health and well-being of our community. It takes all of us to make that positive difference, and it's in that we find our ultimate reward. That's what Ken wants you to know, and that's what he's going to lead us to think about more today. Ken Smythe-Lystico, welcome to Durham.
Thank you for that introduction. This is my 5th time in North Carolina, and I'm excited to be back, and every time I come, I wish I would have brought a bigger suitcase because I want to stay. I absolutely love it here. So this is actually also the 50th national presentation I've done on Ready Freddy. 50, right? And so I was looking at the list of all that were attending last night, and it was also the biggest list that I'd ever seen for one of these events. So kudos to Durham and your commitment to children. And I was thinking of this last night, and I was talking with my wife, and I said, how do you start? How do you start with a group this large and this diverse and this amazing? And she said, well, let me get to know you. And I said, well, that would discredit myself from the very beginning. So she said, go ahead and do it. Okay. So thank you for the introduction. Just a little bit about me. I was born and raised in a very small town in rural Wisconsin, a town of 700, right? More cows than people, absolutely, without a doubt. And as stereotypical as it is, my dad runs a cheese company. Right? Yeah. And it does make me popular when I go home, because then I have to come with a cooler of cheese that I give to all friends and family and anyone that will pass by. But so growing up in a town, who's anyone else from a small town? Right? And there's some nuances that are amazing about small towns. The first is that you truly know everyone, right? You truly do know everyone, and everyone knows you. And if you made a mistake around the corner, your mom will know. Yep. And you do certain things, like when you walk down the street, you say hi to every single person, right? And you give a nod to everyone, you say good morning, you say all those wonderful things that are connected to a small community. And I think growing up in a small community, that element to that has stayed with me in the practice when I've gone to different places, a little bit bigger than 700. And what it's taught me is everybody matters. Everybody matters. And when we do programming, when we think about how we're going to make a difference in a community, it has to matter for the person that's going to be most likely to get missed. And I think that's one of the elements that carried me forward. I did graduate got my degrees there, and then I went to work for a group home. And the irony, right, Sue? Sue drove me here this morning. We worked at the same group home in the same town in Stoughton, Wisconsin. What are the odds of that, right? So when people say it's a small world, it really, truly is. And one of the things, so the group home that I ran was for adjudicated teens. And I had started in a facility where you had a rotating staff, right? So a certain staff would work for a couple hours, and then a new group would come in. And I said to myself, well, that consistency wasn't quite there, and the kids really need consistency. So brilliant as I was at 23, I said, I'll just live in the group home. That way there'll be consistency. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I got 2 weekend days off a month for respite, right? I lived in this facility because I thought, some of these things that's so bright at 23, well, kids are in school all day, I'll have my free time there, right? Adjudicated teens, suspensions, I never looked. But it was a great, great experience, and really taught me to kind of understand, and it really kind of engrossed me in what these children went through, right? But one of the things that would happen is when you got a new child, you'd get this green folder, and it would be their history, right? The new child's history. And the way that they were set up is in chronology, that whatever happened most recent was at top and worked its way down. And so unfortunately how this works though, is almost all their violations would be on the top, right? And so I'm reading this new child's file, and he was 13 years old. And the top of it was offense after offense after offense. He had committed 300 sex offenses by the age of 13. 300. And I read about the abuses of his siblings, his cousins, his neighbors, and the rape abuses. And despite all the, you rah-rah, every child's a miracle, there's a moment where I'm like, this child's a monster. And I was mad at myself. I was really angry at myself because I wanted to find the good in this child before I had the chance to work with him. And of course you read down to the bottom of that file from his beginning, and it was the abuses that he'd been a victim of. And when I thought about it, it didn't excuse any of what he did, but it did help us to understand, where he'd been and where he was going. And it was at that moment when I said, I don't want to work with kids at this end of the spectrum. We got to do more at this other end of the spectrum to ensure that more children don't end up down the road where this kiddo was. And it was at that point that I ended that work and I went to work for Head Start. You talked about the two different ends, right? And at that point I was able to move to Alabama, and there I worked with family support and really great work, got my degree, did a lot of after-school programming, and lo and behold, 6 years is what it took, right? And Alabama went from 49th in education to 48th. My work was done. Right? What more could I do? What more could I do? So at that point I did move to Pittsburgh, and the beauty of all my nonprofits and all of the folks working directly in the community, that's hard work, right? It's amazingly hard work in the trenches, day in and day out. And what I found is one of the things that I didn't have the time to do was to always stay current with best practice and research. You can go to conferences and such, but I always wanted to kind of keep my nose in the book and understand. So I was really fortunate to get to the Office of Child Development. And our office is a little bit unique to a lot of university departments, that our office only has a couple people that teach, right? Most of what we do is in the community. We are completely grant funded, so we operate as if we're a small nonprofit within the university setting. But what we get to do is do that balance between research and best practice, and then training and technical assistance to those that are doing the great work in the community. I like to say that we just talk about what we do, we don't really do much. That's kind of a nice job, right? But that doesn't always work. And this particular project took us really getting on the ground and understanding what was going on in the community. What I wanted to preface this entire presentation is not every single element will fit here. It would be silly for me to stand up here and say exactly how it worked in Pittsburgh, or exactly how it's replicated in Buffalo, or anything like that is going to carry its weight, because we at some point have to sit down and determine where are our needs and what are the elements to this that will have the benefit for this community. So that's kind of the path that we're going to take along the way. What I'll say is this programming all came out of the idea that we, and this might be similar here too, is the third grade reading gap. This is all founded in the third grade reading gap, and our local foundations thought if we could improve the incoming class from kindergarten on, from pre-K on, that those kids would have much higher likelihood of succeeding if they didn't come in so far behind. If that gap didn't start here and widen along the way, we'd have more success. So that's really the pathway that we took, and what we found is there was no simple answer. We were talking last night that the strategies that I'm going to endorse are labor intensive, they take a lot of effort, and I think that's one of the toughest sells sometimes. But then I thought about it, what work of any merit that was easy resulted in great gains, right? So there's going to be a lot of work that goes into these programs, but that's why all of you are here, right? If we divide that work among us and play our roles within the roles that we already play or an expanded role, we'll get it done. So that's my little beginning, and this is what we're going to cover today. And the frog stuff will make some sense as we go across. You're going to see a lot of frog stuff because that's the branding that we used up in Pittsburgh. But I actually kind of love these Carolina blue shirts and Ready Andy here too. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Yeah, maybe that suitcase, I need that to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so we're going to talk about transition and why it's so important. One of the things that we're going to answer at the end of the day is I'm hopefully going to share some information and you're like, I didn't know that, or who knew? I think that's one of the moments you might see today. And we're going to talk about getting kids ready and the role that all of us play, the community plays, the family plays in getting kids ready for school and what that means. Some promising and tried true practices that are from across the nation. How do we know what we need to focus on, and how do we know when we're having success? And so we're going to look at what data exists out there in that regard. Hans galore, oh happy day with Ready Freddy. And then some key resources, and then we're really going to talk about how do we get over those barriers that we know exist, and is there ways that we can do that as a community. But let's start with this. If we were to think about what factors of early childhood would predict success for kids when they entered into school, what things would predict school success? Anyone want to call a couple out, or I'll pretend like I have answers? Significant preschool experience. We put that up on the list, absolutely. So, yep, economic status, income, yep. You were playing with your hair, but did you have? Okay. Yes? How much a child is read to, absolutely. All right, there you go. The parents' education level? Yes. Yep. We'll go here. Family life and all the things that the child's exposed through to within the family life. Yes. Yeah, there, exactly. How much a child is talked to. Absolutely. Nutrition. We always kind of forget about, us in education always forget about health and nutrition, and it's such a vital element. Yes. Yeah, so knowing early if there's some special needs that need to be taken care of, yes. Exposure to trauma. A lot about toxic stress, if anyone's seen all the work coming out of Harvard right now. That's a good list, right? And you said early preschool, right? And what's taught in early preschool? What are the two probably big arenas from early? Social learning and cognitive skills, right? That just tend to be the two. I had one more answer from Becca, please. Social skills, absolutely. So we have a good list, right? If we wrote that list down, it would be, a lot of people would go, yep, that seems right. We might add one or two, but that would be a pretty solid list if we went across the country and asked that same question. Well, interestingly, Pianta, who's not too far from here in Virginia, right, did a study, a meta-analysis with LaPera, and they looked at those things that would predict school success and then actually tested it on a large sample of children. And the two that most came up as thought to be predictive were the two that we kind of ended on, right? So cognitive skills and social emotional, right? So the cognitive skills was put to a test in the beginning. And if we think about it, who's my kindergarten folks? I want to see my kindergarten folks. Right? Just about every community, right, when they enroll children into kindergarten, do some type of assessment. Fair enough? Does that occur here? Yep. And that assessment tends to focus a lot on those cognitive skills, how many shapes, colors, letters that they know, and some other elements around cognitive skills, right? And so they tested it. And if you put that on a scale, with 100% being a perfect predictor and 0 meaning that there's no correlation, what percent do you think cognitive skills was predictive of children doing well through the kindergarten year? think it's 75% or higher? Okay. 50 to 75%? 25% to 50? Lower than 25. It was 25. 25, right? And when we think about it, though, it makes some sense. It's depending on the area, but pretty much nationally, about half of kids that enter into kindergarten have been a part of a quality preschool experience, right? So if you think about the other half, they may not have been exposed to some of those cognitive elements, but with a quality teacher in a structured environment for a year, they could be caught up, right? So they had the potential for it, but it just hadn't been realized yet. So then, interestingly, they asked teachers, what do you think, if cognitive skills wasn't as predictive, what do you think would be more predictive in social, right? The social. If they could just sit in their seat and not poke their neighbor, I could teach them everything, right? Right? If it were that easy, right? And so that was put to the test as well. And we'll do a thumbs up, thumbs down. Better predictor or worse predictor? Just slightly, 18%. Just slightly. And for the similar reasons, right? Those kiddos and even our kids that maybe even struggled in preschool environments, that, militant march to the, and this is where my Wisconsin comes up, the water fountain, but in Wisconsin, the bubbler, right? That's what they call a water fountain in Wisconsin. But those things, again, if children had been exposed, they would be caught up actually quicker with some of the social elements than they could with the cognitive elements, right? Those take a little bit more time. But so, wow, the two things that we thought were going to be the most predictive of children doing well turn out to not be on their own. And this is the key piece, because when this meta-analysis came out, it was tested on their own. But what we're going to say, it's really all of these things together that add up to children doing well. But they found one element. They found one element that was more predictive, and it wasn't on our list yet. It kind of teeters on our list. Parent involvement, right? And you think about it, everything that we could think that was on that list is tied to parent involvement. If they were read to, if they went and experienced things in the community, libraries, museums, those elements, nutrition, health and well-being, and then whether or not they were in a preschool program and all those other elements tied to parent involvement. And yet, when we're going to look at what typical transition events and typical activities are around transition, they tended to always simply engage the child. And yet this navigator of the child's life was left out of the realm. An interesting stat point. Between birth and 18, 80% of a child's life is spent in the home or with family, right? 80%. And us do-gooders think that we're going to solve it all in the 20% that we get them. We have to work with the family. And that's why the interventions that we look at are targeted around that whole child and those that encompass the child. So that's what we're going to look at moving forward. For those that are getting CEUs, these are our learning objectives for the day. Our hope though, is after this presentation today and our time together, we'll have a better idea of what leads to successful outcomes for kids. We're going to look at what activities really produce better, kind of a good, better, best outcome. And then we're going to look at ways that we can plan together, work together to collectively get this gestalt effect by really involving all of us in the success of children. And just a quick note, of course these early successes are tied to early experiences, income as was mentioned, but the beautiful piece of this is regardless of income, there's this protective factor of the involved parent. So if we can embrace that and grow that, we're going to see much better outcomes for kids. Anyone recognize that little guy? I still have the same razor. My parents didn't graduate me to the next level up yet, so. We mentioned a few things, and I like to put these up because all of us play a different role, right? And this one always stands out, and I want to remind us that if you look at the number of age-appropriate books, right? 200 in a high-income household, 50 in a middle-income household, and about 10 in a low-income household, right? We talked about income being one of those things that kind of has a prediction of school success. Interestingly, a friend that works with Pittsburgh Public Schools just shared a new stat. A home library of 500 books, and that's adult books and kid books, was more predictive than income, right? So I wish we could go around with 500 books and just give them out, but we can't always do that. But I remembered the stat, and after having my own daughter, right? And I, as any adult would do, I went home and counted my books, right? Because I wanted to see where I stood in the world, right? And I counted it. And I kind of exaggerate some stories sometimes, but this one, honestly, was 50 on the dot. And I'm like, I didn't know I was doing that good. That's okay. Middle income, that's great. And for the next, this was right before summer, in the next months I went to garage sales, yard sales, rummage sales, street sales, back alley sales, and I got a lot of books. It's amazing. If you go to the store and were to buy children's books, the board books and such, they're kind of expensive. And in fact, they're really expensive at times for the really good ones. And I would get for like $5 a box of books. I'm like, wow, this is amazing, right? And so I went the next Friday and checked my check from my work. My income didn't come up. I was astonished. I didn't get wealthy overnight. And I was thinking about this. You know what? Yours didn't, but your kids might. Right? It wasn't about me. It's the next generation that we're talking about. So that opportunity for the next group. So we're going to take a pause. How many of you work more directly with parents? Wonderful. Wonderful. One of the things that we have to talk about is what predicts kids doing well is, as we talked about, how engaged and how involved and how prepared families are for their role. And so, I was sitting in the hotel last night, beautiful place, right? And like, all I could think about is if frogs equated kindergarten kids, what would a frog have to know to be successful, right? You were probably having that same thought process last night when you were laying around. Or what would a bull have to do to be successful, right? Right? And so I was thinking about this, and I was like, what would a frog have to do to be a successful kindergarten frog? That had to ribbit, 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 hop, 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 and figure out those pesky flies. Right? Similar list. You guys work on the bull, for the bull, okay? But then if you transfer that, what does a successful kindergarten kid look like? It's these elements. The talking, like words and vocabulary. Being able to do things alone and being able to think and solve problems, right? And so you think of a parent's role in developing language, it's really about talking. And I remember this with my daughter who's a little colicky. Anyone have one? Yeah, one? And so I did a lot of bouncing early on, and I knew that talking aloud was very important. I knew it. And I'd walk around and I'd be like, there's the wind blowing through the tree. And you felt like an idiot, right, in the beginning? Right? And I was trained and I knew that this would have an impact. And the difficulty of this is delayed gratification for the parent, right? You don't go like, hi, this is a tree, and the baby's drooling, And so I knew it was important, but I had to stick with it. So those that work with parents, we have to be reminded that some of these things are awkward for families, but we have to still work to promote it. And for the reasons being that we know that the more words you tell them at 3, the better their reading is later. That those families that have college educations those children tend to know more words. But this is really the clincher that by the age 4, there's this 32 million word gap. Yeah. It used to be, the previous study had been 20 million words and they've upped it, right? And I tell you, if there's a job that I don't want, it's the person with the clicker. No, they have ways to figure that out, I know. But when I thought about that for a moment, I'm like, gosh, that would be an awful job. But there's ways to figure that out. But so it's no wonder when we have this range of experience for children that kids come in looking all different ways. And so one of the other elements is obviously through reading, that kids that are exposed to more books are starting off on an upper realm there. But this is one of the interesting things about word acquisition, right? If I were to read the newspaper aloud, there would be about 70, 75 rare words that child heard during the time I was reading, right? And in Pittsburgh, that would be bludgeon and blood trauma. And we got some stuff going on there. Steelers. Yeah. Or as we say, Stillers up there. But if you read a quality children's book, and I did say quality on purpose, right? Because there's a lot of books out there that don't necessarily take on this element, but a quality children's book has around 30 to 35 rare words. And they're intentional to add to the vocabulary of that child and to introduce new things. And they're often tied beautifully in the story or with illustrations to kind of really generate knowledge about that word. But if you look at how the average adult talks to a 3-year-old, we use about 10. What's that tell you we do when we talk to children? We dumb it down, right? We dumb it down because we don't like kids. No, we dumb it down because we actually really love kids. And we don't want them to be confused. We don't want them to feel dumb. We don't want all those things that we feel as adults, right? And the truth be told, they're capable of so much more. And all the brain research that's come out in the last 10 to 15 years has told us that they're capable of more than what we've given, but we have to kind of give it to them in a nurturing way. And we talked about nurturing, right, in affect before. And so there's ways in which we need to promote parents and how we talk to children. And one of the easiest things is really to read more books, because it's kind of naturally in them with self-guided tools that we don't even know exist within it. And the last element that we talked about being both effective frogs and effective children, is how we respond, right? And the honest thing about independence is we teach independence by being responsive. It's kind of like, right? So what that means for when my child drops their glass of milk on my new carpet that I just moved into this weekend is that I don't run and get the paper towel. We sit and let it drip into the carpet, and we talk about the process for how we clean this up. And how, looks like we may have an accident. What do you think we should do? Yeah, we should get something to clean it up. That's a good idea. What would we use? Oh, paper towel. Where do we keep that? Oh, it is very high. You want the ladder? No, not the ladder. How about you ask an adult to get the paper towel? But you know what I mean? It's that process of talking aloud, and that's how we teach to solve problems. And what we often find within the range of families is we have a lot of well-intentioned families that